specific.
Got it.
I think it's 2:01. I think we could go live now.
Sure. All set?
Yep.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. I welcome you all and welcome all the audiences and the panelists to this webinar today. I think at the outset, I should mention that we are all fortunate to be interacting and learning through technology. We know there are several thousands who are battling the virus, and I think our thoughts and prayers are with them. I think on that note and on another note, I think the news that came out in the morning, we heard that Franklin Templeton is winding up 6 of its schemes. And last night, SEBI came out with some relaxations for valuation agencies in terms of the impact of COVID-19 and the lockdown. So I think we are presently at a cusp of a sort of conflicting, it's a conflicting situation right now, and also a very big day for debt market. So I think it's very conducive to have this discussion today, and I think something fruitful is going to come out of the discussion today. Let me start by introducing our panelists today. I think first we have Harsh Singhal, who is Managing Director, Growth of Markets Vertical, CDPQ India. We have Nupur Garg, founder, WinPE. Rahul Khanna, Managing Partner, Trifecta Capital. Ravi Ukadala, CEO, Northern Arc Investments. Indrajit Mishra, who's a partner at IC Universal Legal, and I will be moderating today. I am also a partner at IC Universal Legal. My name is Nitesh Tiwari, as you can see on the screen. When I was first told that I have to moderate today, I was sort of taken back to my college days. I remember moderating a debate, and I sort of penalized one of the participants for using their cell phones. Rest assured, there's going to be no such punitive action on today's discussion. And also, speaking of punitive action, I didn't want it to look like, these small blocks look like a NewsHour debate. Therefore, I came dressed like Rahul Kanwal, instead of Arnab Goswami. So I think we can be all very relaxed and informal about it, and we can hope to learn a lot from this. Before I can move on to the actual questions, I think I should leave it out to the audience. I should lay out the whole format of the discussion to the audience. The whole discussion will be bifurcated in 3 segments. The first segment will obviously be the role of debt markets, debt funds in the present market situation. The second would be the role of the government, if the government is able to give any further access to credit to startups. And third, of course, we'll touch base on the nuances of debt documentation. I think this should also be slightly more interactive for the audiences. So we are going to have an audience poll question, which is going to be a segment-related question at the end of each segment. So that question, as an answer to that question, the audiences can actually reflect their view, their opinion by answering to that question once the poll comes up on the screen, and I will flash the results of that once the poll is set up. Beyond that, I think I will not take much time. If there are any questions and answers that the audiences have, I think the audiences can see a Q&A tab at the end of their Zoom window. At that tab, they can click and they can have questions. And time permitting, I think at the end of the session, we can put out the questions to the relevant panelists. So I think without further ado, I should move on to the questions. And let me start with Nupur, actually. Considering the first segment primarily deals with sort of a gap that may arise, and how debt funds can play a role in that gap, the gap that PEVCs will create perhaps. So you have had a vast experience while working at IFC, in the PE arm of IFC. I think start with trying to understand how indeed PEs react to such crisis. I know the crisis is unprecedented, but how would PEs react? Will they actually make way for debt funds to go ahead? Will they adopt a wait and watch approach? Will they synergize with the debt funds? How do you think will that work?
Thanks, Nitesh. Pleasure to be here. Renuka went on CNBC a few days back, and she made a statement which has really stayed with me. She said, investors can plan for many scenarios, but no investor can plan for a scenario with nil revenues. And I think that is the kind of situation a lot of fund managers are having to grapple with today. But within that, I think what is coming out as an LP is, this is the time when real performance is really going to shine out. And this is the time when every fund manager really has the opportunity to demonstrate their quote unquote portfolio engagement model. And to that extent, it's really been fantastic to see how every fund manager that one talks to has been engaged with portfolio companies and figuring out cash positions and sort of figuring out what is the expense situation, are all employees safe, what is the work from home situation. So I think the industry has really come together extremely well in demonstrating how it has been able to respond to this crisis, and even in terms of how it's able to share within each of its constituents, the knowledge sharing, the experience sharing, and the support that has been created. And I think that's absolutely fantastic. It will really go a long way. But in the context of how people are thinking of their dry powder, I think very similar to every other business, cash is king even for a fund manager today. So either you might need it to put in follow-on capital into some of your portfolio companies, but on the other side, you pick up the old theory of investing. This is one of the better times to invest. It's going to be one of the better vintages if you think about investing. So you could find some really fundamentally strong assets at this time, which otherwise may not be available, or may not be available at the valuations or the terms that you could probably access them right now. And that is what I'm beginning to hear from a lot of fund managers, proactively redoing their sector maps, proactively redoing the sector thesis and saying, okay, as a result of COVID, where are the sectors that we think some sort of growth opportunity exists?
Right.
And growth opportunity, you have to start it from today. You sort of can't go back to 2019 and expect growth to come from there, because from an investor's point of view, you are starting from today. So if I'm buying an asset today, which asset should I buy? Where I think I'm going to expect growth, in the business and in my valuations. So I think that is again a very forward-looking response that fund managers have already started displaying. On this thing about whether equity investors will make way for debt funds and all, if you just take a step back, theoretically speaking, debt and equity are very different instruments, and they are expected to take very different kind of risks. And again, as a matter of definition, equity is the instrument that is supposed to take the higher risk. So if we are sort of expecting that the equity investor will take a step back and will wait and watch and hope that the debt provider will provide stability and maybe survival to companies, I just think we are trying to turn the whole model the reverse way. You're expecting debt to take on a level of risk that debt is not supposed to. And maybe there are specialized debt pockets. There are credit funds that are comfortable with stress, not distress, because distress I think is another 12 months away. But on there's stress, but you have balance sheet stress, financial stress, operational stress, all kinds of stress, and a combination of all these stresses that companies will be experiencing. So how many credit funds would want to get in now and get their hands dirty now, as against wait for another 3 to 6 months when we have more visibility on what's going to happen? Are we, how do we stagger back into operations and all? So I would think that equity is the instrument, it's the product that's more suited to taking a longer term bet and taking advantage of a situation like this, and to expect debt to step in and make a company good enough for equity, to me is it doesn't make sense.
Right. So I think my takeaway from this would be that if at this point in time, there are company with lucrative assets, there are company with decent valuation, since we are in a way going back to ground zero. As you said, you can't expect the levels that were in 2019. 2020 is sort of a reboot, a reset button, and we are going back. And I think if valuations are attractive, if the company is attractive, and if there is potential, I think PEs would be willing to take it up instead of making it away. Right. So I think I will move on to Harsh. And I think it becomes important in Harsh's context, because CDPQ is perhaps taken a lot of exposure in Indian NBFCs. It has taken some exposures in infra. I think there were some talks of having an InvIT also on the cards. Now, in the present crisis, a crisis looming large, do you think CDPQ will go ahead and show more interest in these sectors? Or would it be participating even more in emerging markets like India?
So thanks for having me here. Pleasure to be interacting with all of you. No, I think it's a the way we look at this situation, it's a unprecedented situation, of course, and in some sense a humanitarian crisis. Uh, so and the way I think Nupur described it, I can't describe it any better. Right now the time is for equity to kind of step up and for debt to kind of come in, at a later stage. I mean, the way we think about it is there are three layers, right now, which one has to think through. One is the current situation. Right now, the COVID itself, no one knows, how long will it take, how long will the lockdowns last, and what is the extent to which India will go through the COVID cycle. Is it going to, end at 30,000 cases, or is it going to end at God forbid, higher number of cases? Then there is a life after we have had let's say a success over the COVID. How will that look like? How will businesses revive after that? And then there is another additional layer of risk, which is revival of COVID again in the next winter. So that's the other layer which one has to think through. And then there is a long-term view of broadly India or emerging markets globally. Now, if you ask me, whether in long term, investors like CDPQ or any foreign investors convinced about India and investing in credit markets in these economies, the answer is yes. And we would continue to support wherever there are investment opportunities. But I think the shorter term and the medium term, maybe once there is some amount of clarity around at least the second wave of COVID, I think that would be the time for debt funds to kind of start nibbling into opportunities. And before that, it will be very tough for debt funds to kind of come in and play very actively into any investment thesis. I think the other point one should always keep in mind is right now, no matter how much dry powder funds have, whether it is equity fund or debt fund, all of them want to preserve their existing portfolio, and rightly so. That's the right approach. That if you have been with the company, that's the company best, and their strengths and weaknesses. So it's better to invest more time in those companies. Right now, even if let's say if I want to support a company, there is no way I can diligence the company also properly.
Right, that's right.
So I think those are the things which one has to keep into account when we are doing a deal. The last point I would also say is that in this environment, whether it is the way I described the short and medium term, pricing of debt also is going to be tough for a credit risk fund. The kind of risk which we are taking, the returns we will not be able to take, those kind of returns, and it'll be kind of unremunerative even for equity investors to take a debt at this point of time. But having said that, I think I don't want to leave everyone with a very grim picture. The point is, that these are tough times, and so one has to first live through these, at least the first phase of this cycle, and then there are investors who are willing to come up and step up, but we have to first ride this storm through.
Right. So yeah, it's actually very grim all around. So thank you for that last note. And also, I mean, just one corollary, Harsh, to you only to that question. The whole IL&FS crisis, followed by the SL fiasco, so or the shadow bank crisis in India, have that really dampened the spirits so far as the NBFC sector is concerned?
So answer to that is unfortunately yes. I think it's actually the problem is not the crisis per se. Actually, crises do happen in all the economies across the globe. There are one or two institutions which keep blowing up. The problem is actually the answer of regulators, the way regulators have been responding to these issues. Look at how RBI has been sitting on this NBFC liquidity, and yesterday you saw the bank's response to the LTRO scheme which came.
Right.
The bids were just half of what RBI wanted. I mean, that just shows what needs to be done. So I think regulators in our country have been, I don't know for whatever reasons, have not been bold enough to tackle this issue, in a more aggressive manner, or in a more bold manner, and that is really hurting the sentiment. And it's not only hurting the sentiment. Actually, the biggest problem it is creating, it is stifling the credit flow into the economy.
Right.
Look at the picture you have right now in the economy. Every day, banks are parking almost 5 lakh or 7 lakh crore worth of money at reverse repo to RBI, back to RBI. So that's the excess liquidity which is existing in the system. It's not flowing back into the economy.
Right.
And the results are in front of all of us. So I think that's one area where we need to really step up, and it's hurting the economy as well as investor sentiment.
Right. Understood. Moving to, I think these were a lot of macro level talks, so to say. So moving to slightly micro level, if I have to move to Rahul and Ravi, both of you run credit funds, and Rahul, I think you run the venture debt fund. It has a slight flavor of equity also in it. So, and I think both of you manage a huge array of portfolios, especially if I have to speak about Ravi. I think Ravi manages a lot of portfolio, microfinance and vehicle finance, and looking at NBFCs mostly. And I think Rahul, you have perhaps, let's say 50, 60 odd companies in your portfolio, right? From e-commerce to consumer to enterprise to, goods and services, etc. So in these times, let's say in these trying times, and even after, once these times are over, I think the general sentiment is this time is here to stay for a long time. Let's hope it does not. But let's say once this does get over, we tide over these situations. Are you going to look at a good proposal that comes to you? And if it comes to you, how are you going to, recalibrate or reorient your investment strategy? Are there going to be any changes pursuant to this whole COVID situation?
Yeah. No, listen, thank you for hosting this first. I know it's a Friday afternoon. Unfortunately, there are no bars open, so there's nowhere else you can go to, other than being here. So thanks everyone for being here.
Right.
Our industry is in some ways a companion asset class to venture equity, right? And venture debt and venture equity sort of walk side by side. In some ways, we think of our money following the flows of venture capital, right? And so I think, as everyone adjusts to, there was a pre-COVID, I think we're now in a with COVID world, and then maybe 3 years later, it'll be a post-COVID world, right? So I think what we're seeing is that as we take stock of the situation, the first thing that many companies have done and many investors have done is rightfully is just, circle the wagons, ring fence the business, make sure that whatever they can do in the short term, including managing costs, they can get under control, right? I think going forward, people will have to, in some ways, think more broadly about how they re-engineer their business.
Right.
How can they continue to have more variability in cost? One of the challenges that we've seen is India is generally up and to the right, but it's a very bumpy road. And every time there's a dip, companies that have high fixed costs tend to fall off, right? And so, I think in my experience in venture, and I've been at it since 2005, there are these shocks to the system every 3 to 5 years, right? So there was 2001, 2008, 15, 20, right? We've seen it a few times. And even in the last 5 years, I would call, rollout of GST, demonetization. So in some ways, we've been training for a marathon, right? This is it, right? We're in the marathon now. And we had our 7-kilometer run, we had our 14-kilometer run, and our 21. And now we're in for 40. Just don't know if it ends at 40, right? That's the hard part with this marathon. So I think a lot of the entrepreneurs and the VCs now, I think are a lot more battle hardened. And therefore the actions they've taken to protect themselves and their portfolio companies have actually been very timely and very disciplined, right? So I think it's a great sign that within the venture capital ecosystem, you've seen a lot of maturity, you've seen a lot of discipline. Yes, unfortunately, that's meant some job cuts, it's meant wage reductions, it's meant renegotiating terms with vendors. But I think they've managed to buy themselves typically 9 to 12 months of time to then think about fundraising 12 months from now, right? So I guess the answer to your question on what are we doing in the next 9 to 12 months, I think one, we will have to recalibrate our pace of deployment, because I think the number of deals coming through the door will be substantially lower.
Right. That's
And two, I think we'll have an added layer of sort of the with COVID lens, right? Which is, as we look at a business, besides everything we used to look at before in terms of team and security and unit economics, etc., I think we'll have an added layer of business resilience, ability to deal with discontinuity. Can companies variabilize cost better? So those are some of the added filters.
Right.
As it relates to sectors, I think we've seen certain parts of e-commerce still do quite well. As an example, we have relationships with Big Basket,
That's
Farm,
right. That's right.
like that. We have companies in the agri space. I think that's attracting a lot of attention. So companies like NinjaCart are doing really well. We've seen opportunities in the education space. We have a relationship with Vedantu. So distance education, distance learning, training, and health and wellness, right? Including more tech in the health and wellness space and lifestyle services, right? So I think you'll still see deal flow. It'll probably be muted. It'll probably be at about half of what it was in the last year, could be even slightly less. And I think along with that, the venture debt ecosystem will have to kind of march side by side, albeit at a slower pace.
Okay. And so I just had one small bit to your anecdote, taking cue from what Harsh said, that regulators have to be more active. I think inactivity on the part of regulators would lead to the whole marathon becoming like a hurdle also in between. You need to jump each hurdle and it becomes a steeples race. Anyway, moving to Ravi, I think Ravi, on the same point, how will you, reorient and recalibrate your strategy, especially in the light of the RBI COVID-19 package? It's been given to perhaps a lot of your portfolio companies, and they may be acting on that. How will you look at it now?
Sure, and I think my co-panelists have anyways captured quite a bit of this. So we generally work in the financial and lending space, and it's kind of a look-through sector, right? So parts of the economy will get affected, and hence it transmits via the lending sector as well. So right now, the impact is largely because of the reduced mobility, as it were, and that's why probably we can't have that drink, as Rahul mentioned as well. So we have to suffice by getting through by having drinks at home. So in terms of portfolio,
I think Ravi, you've jumped mute there.
I think right now the question is, look at proposals right now.
I think Ravi, we missed you for about 10 seconds.
And right. Sure.
No, you're not audible. I think if you have another active device, maybe you'll have to deactivate it.
So can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely.
I was trying to get through via the mobile. So is that?
Yeah, it's perfectly audible. Yeah.
Okay. So as I was saying, that most of these companies are currently facing on a liquidity situation, and it's not really a solvency situation. And if you see from what you referred to as the RBI COVID package, that's largely to alleviate these short-term liquidity issues that are currently prevailing. And Nupur hit the nail on the head, saying that additional debt funding from commercial capital right now is not going to be quite easy to get given the adjusted risk return matrices that you're running now. So I had a fund 6 months ago, the investments that I would looked at were on a completely different risk return schedule versus what it is right now. So commercial capital is very unlikely to come in and support at this time. And probably it's not fair to even ask the equity guys to provide support from a liquidity perspective.
Right.
So that's where the point that you made in terms of the RBI support coming in via the COVID package really becomes necessary. And Harsh correctly pointed out that liquidity is currently at a systemic level. From the top, it's not percolating down to where it is needed. And now, how do you ensure that that transmission kind of happens? As Harsh already pointed out, that LTRO has not worked out. So we are working on a few, you can say, interventions using commercial capital as well, where somebody has to come in and take the lowest sliver of risk. to kind of readjust the risk return back to where it was. And that's how some commercial capital come in. But otherwise, you need innovations which have frankly not happened in the past. I mean, unlike what the Fed does and what the developed world has done in terms of direct intervention in the markets, the RBI and the government, and maybe this has to do with a little bit of history, is very reluctant to intervene in the markets directly.
Right.
They have always relied on intermediation. So even with the new package, the RBI will flood liquidity. It will goad or provide some moral suasion or push its PSUs or SIDBI or NABARD and those kind of intermediaries to take on that risk, which may not be as quick as what probably the system needs. And hence, what is directly needed is direct intervention. You can provide the lowest layer and then make that as an incentive for commercial capital to come in, but that will probably help from the liquidity angle. In the absence of that, what our portfolio companies and what probably everybody in the system today is doing is having a razor-eye focus on costs and trying to survive through this. Right? So given that business is at a halt, the new lending that you generally refer to is only to kind of alleviate some of the pain, which has to come from internal sources. So focus on cost, try to get through the next few months, keep in touch with your employees, customers, etc., and be ready for the post-COVID world. And I think that's what we are doing with our portfolios and with our portfolio companies as well.
Right. So just as a corollary to the earlier question, Rahul, do you think equity kicker will still be, lucrative? I think in the very initial answer, Nupur mentioned about right assets and right valuations. So, taking cue from there, will it still be lucrative in terms of your venture debt strategy?
Yeah, no, I think, we have to recognize that the bar for venture debt was always quite high, right? And it's not like we were pricing in more risk or less risk. So I think one, to avail of venture debt anyway, companies need to be at a certain stage, demonstrate certain economics. I think what's happened with this crisis is there's going to be a resetting of valuations across the board. And I think for particularly new deals that we get involved with, us along with the equity investors will have the same entry point for our equity options. So I think if anything, particularly in growth stage, things had gotten quite frothy in the last year. And so we were happy to be on the receiving end of those where we were already in companies. But as we look to make new investments, I think this will be a great vintage year for outsized equity returns, provided people have the conviction to write checks. And that's the hard part, right? Everyone's running this way. It's very hard to write checks in this environment. But I think for those that do, it's a buyer's market. I think they can set valuations. And I think in many ways, a flat round will be the new up round. And so if we can get into those situations, then great. It's a good time to still rely on equity kickers as part of the venture debt construct.
Understood. So actually, yeah, that's very well said. A flat round would perhaps be the next up round. So, right. So I think this last question for this segment, before I can move on to Indrajit, I think this last segment, I think you've already answered the last question, which is more in terms of, how would you look at your, what would be the key considerations? Would you restructure your existing portfolios in case you see, stress going to de-stress eventually? Would you restructure them, or will you take comfort if there's an existing PEVC sitting there? Would you be allied with them in your approach? How would you look at your portfolios going down? So Rahul, I think you can take this one.
Sorry, you were addressing that to Indrajit, right?
No, I'm saying before I can move on to Indrajit. Yeah.
Sorry, can you just repeat that?
No. I said before I can move on to Indrajit, I think one last question to you, Rahul and Ravi, would be, how would you look at your portfolio? I mean, how will you, portfolio, let's say, which is going from stress to de-stressed, or would you count on the comfort of existing VC, or will you try to restructure your existing indebtedness? How will you look at it?
No, good point. I think we expect all stakeholders to be responsible. So one, we've expected companies to take some tough decisions on managing cost. And we've seen that response lead to anywhere between a reduction of 20 to 50% of fixed cost across the board, right? So one, they've taken, share of the burden. In most cases where companies were already well funded, I think the request has been to provide a little bit of flexibility on the principal repayment, which we're happy to consider on a case by case. I think where we're expected to put more money, I think we're saying, look, at this point, it'll be very hard for us to put more money in. We'd like to wait out another quarter or two before we put in more capital. To Nupur's point, I think more money is probably the prerogative of the equity investor at this point.
Right.
It becomes pretty hard for us. So I think our flexibility will come more in terms of the repayment as opposed to putting more capital at risk.
Ravi, how will you look at it in this situation?
So, so right now, like you're saying, it's largely about liquidity, right? And most of our partner companies, because they're NBFCs, have so because of the RBI moratorium, they have given moratoriums on the asset side to all their borrowers, and as is the need right now in the situation. What we are trying to help them with is to get the moratoriums on the liability side. So as capital market providers, our debt is a very minuscule portion of their balance sheet, especially given the rating space we play in, which is A- to kind of BBB minus kind of space. It's largely a lot of bank and NBFC borrowing. And hence, that's where, because we have so many connects across the financial investors, we have helped arrange a lot of this financing to these companies as well. That's where our largest kind of intervention is. It's the OPEX space is very small. And for a typical, say, microfinance entity, which has about 1,000 crores of AUM, the monthly OPEX is only about 3 to 5 crores. Whereas the amount of liquidity that they cycle through in a month is almost 1/10 of the entire portfolio. So about 70 to 100 crores could be the amount of flow in terms of collections and disbursements that they might do. So OPEX is not such a big thing. Is largely with respect to the lender repayments. That's where we are working with. And to answer your other question, see, this is going to be the litmus test in terms of which companies come out of the event. And it's not nice to borrow apparel from the healthcare industry, but as we've seen the virus affect more with those who have comorbidities,
right,
companies that go weak into the crisis will probably not survive it. The ones which are, you can say, healthy and strong and did not have, say, problems with respect to quality, unsustainable OPEX structures, etc. Those will come through, probably get a market which is better placed for them to capture. And those would be the ones that we would want to back going ahead as well. So I think that's the way we are looking at it in terms of our discussions with most of the companies as well. And frankly, down the year, the risk spreads are definitely going to be much more appealing once you get past this event. Because risk-free rates are obviously going to go down. They've already started to go down. And probably the amount of money that comes into credit will obviously reduce. You alluded to the event with Franklin Templeton yesterday. That is also going to channel less money into this space. So the spreads will definitely widen. So in terms of risk return proposition, say 6 months down the line, once we have passed the COVID impact, I think, as Rahul mentioned, the deal flow, while it will be lower, will be at a better kind of metrics that you would want to invest in. So I think that's when it will pick up and the spreads will be higher.
I think you rightly said the week will perhaps be weeded out. I remember someone saying 2 days ago that the fight for this virus is going from saving lives to saving livelihoods. I think everyone in each ecosystem is actually running, going on the same path. I think all running the same path. I will move to Indrajit. Indrajit, what are you observing in the industry? Has there been, any noticeable change or difference since the IL&FS scenario? Harsh just mentioned that it has been a dampener, IL&FS, and then post that SL, and then shadow bank crisis, and now COVID. I think we saw some things pick up in the December 2019 quarter, but then since then there has been the whole crisis situation again, and this is a sort of unprecedented crisis. How do you look at things from now on?
Thank you, Nitesh. Good afternoon, all, and thank you for taking time to join this session. I totally agree with Harsh that post IL&FS and SL, the things have been quite a dampener. Particularly bank funding have started drying up in wake of rising NPAs. Institutional funding to funds and NBFCs suddenly took a hit as more and more reputed business houses started defaulting in their scheduled payouts. The bad practice of evergreening of loans came to limelight, and suddenly I think there appeared a bubble in the lending borrowing system waiting to burst. We did see even good managers struggling to raise capital for almost a year post IL&FS fiasco. But eventually it appeared, as you said, in 2019 that the worst was behind with some overhauling of the system, particularly big players like IFCs and CDPQs investing in the system. The established funds with a track record of generating returns for their LPs were still better placed given the re-ups from LPs of the earlier funds, which is a luxury not enjoyed by the first-time fund managers, right? However, even in such cases, we saw a lot of investors deferring their allocations because of the fear factor on account of even big boys defaulting every now and then. While the system started recovering from the ripple effect caused post ILFS era, I think the respite was short-lived since COVID-19 is here now and with bigger challenges, as Rahul and Ravi mentioned. And you also mentioned about Franklin Templeton, which is a big news. It's shutting down 6 of its open-ended debt funds following high-risk, high-return credit risk strategy. So obviously, I think debt funds would be more averse to high-risk, high-return strategy as of now. Having said that, there was a silver lining amidst all the chaos. Certainly, like there have been new investor class emerging for debt products, where investors like life insurance companies and banks had started taking further interest in debt funds as a product, supporting the quality debt fund managers, as is evident from the successful fundraisers by the GPs present on this panel. So, frankly, I think debt funds following a conservative approach during these times and investing in strong and robust businesses may withstand the tide going forward. That's how I look at it.
Right. So I think, thank you, Indrajit. I think with that, we'll end this segment, and I'll just raise the poll for the audience that even they feel interactive. So I'm going to launch the first poll. The audiences will react, I think, within 10 to 15 seconds, and then we'll look at the results. So I think I've just shared the results, and I think the audiences, I think there's almost a close gap between restructuring the debt exposure and a blend of two. I think everyone wants to ring fence their existing portfolios, and I think even the audiences want to do that. So I think with that, I think I'll start the second segment, and second segment is the role of government in giving access to credit to startups and venture funds. And I think here, perhaps the most pertinent panelist would be Nupur. This is more important from the perspective of the fact that, you know, we were having this discussion before we went live about what role do you have in SIDBI. So you are an independent director, and you are also on the recommending committee of CSAS. So my question would be pointed at CSAS. You think CSAS has been effective? You think going forward it will be effective? And you know, would it be wise at this point in time to expect something more in you know, the entire ecosystem other than CSAS? You know, or do you expect government to come out with more stimulus, more packages?
Thanks, Nitish. Let me just take the whole CSAS thing first. And, you know, before we went live, we spoke a little bit about this, and I'm just going to repeat myself. Right. So, you know, I have a couple of hats on here.
Right.
One hat that thinks about SIDBI. The other is the hat that thinks as an LP, because I'm also on the FFSIC. And then, you know, I've been a part of this industry for the longest time. So I just think as somebody who's part of this this whole ecosystem. And then, you know, all three are very different perspectives. And but honestly, when I think about it and I try to find some balance in how I think about it, there's one common thought that comes out. You know, and that is largely of appreciating, and not largely, I think that is completely of appreciating this particular initiative that SIDBI has. So what is SIDBI's participation in this ecosystem? It is an LP through the FFS. where it manages the government of India's money.
Right.
Right. It is not, investing from its own balance sheet. There is no other LP that has so far launched any scheme of this sort. There is no other DFI so far which has launched any scheme of this sort. SIDBI from its own balance sheet has launched a scheme where it says just because we as SIDBI, we are the Indian DFI, we have a very large role in the startup ecosystem, even if it is off balance sheet, but through the FFS. It is a scheme that aims to provide credit to loss-making companies which are running out of cash and which offer negligible security.
Right.
And if you put it all together, I can only come up with appreciation for the kind of risk that SIDBI is willing to underwrite. And it is. I don't think it is possible to find any underwriting model that supports evaluation of this kind of a risk in this kind of a situation. Right. And it's not that you have a loss-making company running out of cash without security, but you have visibility into how that situation is going to change. You actually don't have any visibility. All you can do is hope that this particular financing will help in changing that situation. So to that extent, I applaud, honestly, the scheme, the risk and the ability to underwrite the risk that SIDBI has shown. I think, and if you think about the scheme in itself, it's very early days. It's very early days to see what's going to be the actual quantum, how much money will be given. But from what I understand, in the first 24 hours, there were about 200 applications that had reached SIDBI. But if you look at the scheme and all the feedback that has been coming in, and you just take a step back and say, for example, you compare it with the future fund that the UK government has launched.
Right.
So the future fund insists that the scheme will participate only to the extent of 50% of the funding, and that investors have to bring in the balance 50. And it aims to create some sort of an alignment between public and private capital, between the debt provider and the existing investors and the existing stakeholders, in saying all of us are in this together, taking the risk together and working towards the outcome together. The eligibility criteria there is far more stringent.
Right.
And it has a mandatory conversion of this debt into equity.
Right.
At whatever future date. So so if we look at that and we think about the features of the CSAS, I would be very surprised if we were able to say that CSAS could have been done differently without upfront saying, sorry, we are just writing off all of this 100 crores.
Right. So actually, very rightly put, I don't think no other LP has come out with this, and SIDBI was one of the very first to scramble in the immediate aftermath of lockdown to ensure at least startups get their bridge funding at that point in time. This also assumes, I think, importance in the present scenario where I think FEMA was recently amended to restrict or rather monitor in a restrictive manner the inflows from China. I think the message that government of India wants to send out is that Indian businesses will not be up for grab at cheap valuations. At the same time, do you think, taking cue from this, Nupur, do you think that the government should, do even more through its regulators like SEBI, RBI, PFRDA, or IRDA, for example, to ensure that there is more capital in the industry now and going forward from now, since we are going to be in very tough times?
Yeah, I've always been a big champion of mobilizing more domestic institutional LP capital for the industry. Right. Because for any industry to sustain, you can't be solely reliant on offshore capital. Right. You really need to create that domestic pool. But if you, for example, if you take IRDA, IRDA does permit insurance companies to back funds.
Right.
And it's just that insurance companies haven't done that. And they have, all of them have their own reasons for how they're constructing their portfolio. So, to a certain extent, it's also been an ongoing dialogue between the industry and, say, PFRDA or, the NPS and with insurance companies to see how to channel that capital. And then, if you think about it, even with the funds that already have capital, even with the funds that already have dry powder, are we really seeing a rapid pace of deployment? And what would be the level of incremental benefit if the government scrambles and says, if IRDA scrambles up and says, and PFRDA scrambles up and says, come on, let's all put 10% of our capital to work in this industry.
Right.
Our fund managers, yes, fund managers would run, they would fundraise. The fundraising process in itself, from registration to raising all of their money, because none of these LPs will be 100% of the fund.
Right.
So to do a fund close, to start deploying, it's not going to start happening in the next 4 weeks. Right. So, I think these are discussions that have been on for a very long time. And I think they have to continue because domestic capital is critical for any industry to survive in.
Right.
In terms of the stimulus from the government, I read this article by Gulcharan Das in ET a few days back about India facing Sophie's choice. I think that article beautifully lays out all the different demands on whatever stimulus the government rolls out, right? It's going to be a very, very complex task to try and find the right stimulus. So from the daily wage earner, to the person who's self-employed, to the small livelihood owner, to people who are going to lose their jobs, MSMEs, financial system is going to be stressed. And to within that, to throw in startups where you're saying, I've got 10 people employed.
Right.
And I'm still not contributing to the economy in the real sense because I'm really not selling anything. I'm really not making money. I'm not sure, I can't speak for the government, but I mean, if you just take a step back and look at the demands and the challenges that the government has to deal with, I don't think the industry should just sit there and hold their breaths waiting for the government to announce like $1 billion package for the startup ecosystem. I think we need to come together and figure out how we can just move forward.
Right. I think even historically speaking, not even historically, actually, if you go back 2 years, I think implementation of any stimulus has been sort of difficult in India. You think about the private fund that was going to be in place to fund the last mile funding for real estates. And then post the shadow bank crisis, there was perhaps some talks about having a stressed asset fund. So in order to launch these things, I think government itself has a lot of consideration to be mindful of, to simply just dole out, money so easily. I would move to Ravi and Rahul. Do you think, taking cue from the RBI regulatory package, do you think in the venture debt ecosystem, you would want to see some relaxations? Perhaps, let's say, enlarging the definition of startups, or maybe, even valuation related instructions from SEBI, just like the one instruction that came out last night for mutual funds. Perhaps giving more flexibility, also giving more, light to your path, because AIFs more or less do not are not as regulated as mutual funds, as a creature. So maybe Rahul can go first on this.
So, first I just wanted to add to what Nupur was saying about SIDBI. We've had a long relationship with SIDBI through the India Aspiration Fund and then FFS.
Right.
Even as this scheme was being drafted, we had a few opportunities to engage. So I think, full credit where it's due. I think the action was timely. I do think that, we don't necessarily need to change the definition of startup. I think a lot of thought has gone into that. The fact that these have to be sponsored entities, things like that. I think those are all good signals. Because look, I think, putting good money behind bad is not the answer, right? And I think to Nupur's point, this is very risky capital, right? And to SIDBI's credit, it's priced it like debt when maybe it should have been priced like equity, right? But the fact of the matter is that it's timely. I think a couple of things that I would say that maybe if one was to look at another tranche and do more of this, one, I would say there's a few terms in there that may be tricky. So things like positive unit economics. Most startups are in development phase and may not be generating a lot of revenue. So it's hard to demonstrate positive unit economics. Two, there's an expectation of promoter has to have invested his own capital. I think most of our promoters are first generation, right? In fact, everything they have is in the business. So I think it's very hard for them to have to put in real cash. And I don't know, what that number is, but if there's some clarity around promoter capital. And three, there was this term around, they get excluded if they have working capital limits from banks. I can tell you that's like winning the lottery, right, for these companies. And so having them to retire that or take that away, if there can be a better way to adjust for that, I think that'll be very helpful, because I know a lot of young companies would hate to give up their working capital limits. If they've drawn them or not, it's very hard to get them back, right? So those are just a few comments on the program. I think in terms of, this idea that we are lesser regulated and or, what flexibility we need. Look, I think SEBI's job is largely being to protect the interest of investors, right? And I think to that extent, it does a very good job of making sure that we run our businesses in the best interest of our investors. I also think that it's taken a lot of work to open up the domestic LP pool, right? And to Nupur's point, while insurance companies have not been very active, we've had the opportunity to now bring 13 insurance companies into our LP base, right? So we have life, general, public sector, and private sector. And I think even for them, to come this step, they had to build AIF programs. They had to convince their boards that this is a set of products that it's worth considering, as insurance companies. I think if we went and rocked the boat and said, what, we want flexibility on repayment, or, we want service coupon this quarter, I think it'll spook a lot of that money. And so I think we have to be very mindful of what signals we send out within the broader credit space, because I think on the domestic capital formation side, it's not easy. And particularly institutional LPs are just getting comfortable with lending to these kinds of vehicles, right? Non-bank, non-NBFC. So I just think that whatever we do, we have to sort of recognize that, all of that will transmit back up to their perception of risk and or our ability to manage the risk, right? And so I think here's also where managers need to take a tough call and say, okay, here's what I can do and here's what I can't do, right? And we've had to have that conversation with portfolio companies to say, we don't have the flexibility to defer coupons, or we don't have the flexibility to do a 12-month, extension. And that's just a limitation of the asset class. So I'm not pushing for any particular relaxations at this point.
Ravi, would you think about some relaxations, especially given that, you're exposed to NBFCs?
So I think there is a very relevant point right now. First off, I just want to reiterate that everybody knows that these are extraordinary times, right? I mean, these are unprecedented, and hence whatever playbook the government had or whoever had earlier does not pretty much apply. So we need to kind of think afresh. Everybody will have us, and everybody expects the government to do a lot of this. Large part of this is warranted, given that only the heavy hand can right now guide an intervention.
Right.
But I think the ask, whatever is the ask, should be temporary. And I think as long as the government, whether it's through the regulators, whether it's on the FIS side, comes out and says that I am there to help you for the next 3 months, for the next 6 months, I don't know what the 100 asks you might have. Everybody knows their segment and business best. Come out and ask me for 3 months or 6 months of relaxation. I will give it, no questions asked. You have to return back to business. You know how to manage that piece, right?
Right.
The example like what Rahul was mentioning, if I have to go to my investors and say that I don't want to pay coupon for the next, say, quarter or whenever is the next scheduled one, there is some damn good reason that I want to give that kind of relaxation to my companies if I want to go ahead and do that. And I will make sure that those investing companies use that relaxation effectively for me to then pass it on.
Right.
I bear the potential brunt that maybe the investors will not like it, but I have taken that decision. So I think you have to let every segment take their own decision.
Right.
Government just needs to be open, saying that whatever you want, as long as it's temporary, I am willing to consider. You want extensions of bond maturities, you want, say, for a mutual fund, you want to ban all redemptions for 3 months.
Right.
It's a drastic step, and they will bear problems from the investors. But if they think that is what is needed, SEBI should not come out and say that this is unprecedented. Right? I'm just throwing some things out there, but in terms of scale, we can't go by what has happened in the past. So there is a need for relaxations to be asked. As long as there is temporary, I am all for it. And the risk only comes from, I think, everybody's expectation that somebody will use this situation to put in place things which they have been arguing for the longest time. But as long as it's temporary, then there is no such risk. And that's probably the max relaxation that I can ask for. So it's to everyone or every segment to find out what they want.
Right. So I think very well put that heavy hand can guide the way right now. At the same time, I mean, that way should not be utilized for any private agenda or, to further delinquencies which were existing pre-COVID. So it's important that we have to look at it that way. So before I move on to the next poll, I think I'll have a question, and the last question of this segment for Harsh. Harsh, do you think your CDPQ has been heavy on infra and green economy and renewable energy, etc. Do you expect any relaxations from the government in this sector if you intend to, be bullish on this segment?
No, I think, to be honest with you, on the infra side, we have been, as you rightly said, bullish. And I think broadly, if you see, in this current situation, infra is coming out to be reasonably safe asset class, barring, the airports, etc. So I think overall, this program will continue. And of course, as I said earlier, in terms of the long-term thesis, there is, not many changes. One has to be very cognizant of what happens in the short term. I think I want to come back to the topic which we are debating on what I think all of us are agreeing a lot needs to be done by the government.
Right.
And one thing I have to say is some of you might have noticed pension funds got an exemption for investing in infrastructure. And that is not something, an idea which just came to the government. We went and pitched to the government with the right kind of
right.
Logic. So today's situation is even more interesting. So what is happening is that government doesn't have a lot of fiscal space, and that situation probably is for this year. It hopefully will not be for next few years. So when we are asking government for some things, we have to be also innovative in terms of how can we help the government in not letting tax revenues go short heavily, but at the same time we are able to create fillip for the economy. So to give you an example, to be very specific, rather than asking for a specific tax benefit this year, can we ask for a benefit or tax benefit which actually accrues in the next few years, not this year? So effectively you have created demand this year which will help government accrue more taxes,
Right.
and next year government will have probably a little bit more room to give that benefit back. So my request to all the audience is to be very innovative in when you are thinking this through, because at the end of the day government hands are also tied.
Right.
And the more suggestions we can make to the government, the better the outcome probably will be.
Right. I think you made the request to the audience at the right time, because we'll move the poll for the audience and the question is very pertinent to this segment. So I think polling is on. We'll wait for another 15 seconds. I think our audience today is 4 steps left of Karl Marx. So I think everyone wants the government to reduce. Right. So I think the audience is it wants the government to play a high role, and I think the government can play that role, with subject to the caveats that I think the panelists put in place. That is very interesting. I think the last segment for today would be I think it's our favorite. I think Indrajit and my favorite. I think because the devil lies in the details, and it is the documentation, the dead documentation that lawyers come up with. As morbid as it may sound, I think when defaults happen, that's the only time lawyers get to have some fun and perhaps make some money. But let's see. So, Indrajit, what do you think? I mean, in the coming times, I'm sure there already are some cases before multiple high courts of India. But in the present situation, you see what kind of actions do you see coming from the portfolios? How do you think they're going to approach the lenders? How do you think the lenders should react to such a situation? And what safeguards do you think the lenders can put in place, to avoid a confrontational situation, to avoid a contestation situation? And if indeed there is a contest, how do you think the lenders should go about it? Induljeet, you're not audible. You'll have to unmute yourself. Yeah.
Sorry. I think let me take your second question first, which I think deals with how the portfolios will kind of react, or what kind of action to be anticipated for portfolios in case of a default. See, in my view, during these unprecedented times, it is likely that borrowers may resort to and seek reliefs under force majeure clauses or the doctrine of frustration, as enshrined under Section 56 of the Indian Contracts Act. Lately, we have been hearing about these concepts, or I'm sure people would have attended so many webinars and meetings, Zoom meetings, where they would have heard about the concept. So first of all, I think a force majeure, which is generally a contractual revenue, it's absent in the debt documents, unless the portfolio companies would have negotiated hard on incorporating it in the material adverse change or material adverse effect clauses. But otherwise, generally, a force majeure clause is absent in any debt transaction documents. However, as far as the doctrine of frustration is concerned, it's a common law remedy, and I think a borrower may take shelter under frustration of underlying business contracts with customers, which may have led to impact on its revenue and consequently leading to payment delays or defaults. But I think such plea of force majeure, if at all it's applicable from the debt document, or frustration would generally lead to an event of default situation under debt transaction document, and most of the debt documents capture it quite elaborately, such situations leading to event of default. Having said that, I think in order to obviate any force majeure or frustration plea by the borrowers, it is essential that funds engage in careful examination of the contracts executed with the borrowers in order to ascertain their rights and entitlements, and at the same time prepare necessary counterattacks and rival arguments. Where the present situation, in my view, has resulted into, or may certainly result in, substantial depletion in value of the portfolio company, eventually the funds will have to rely on the provisions of the debt documents for the way forward, right? In such circumstances, I think the clauses in the event of defaults, particularly the material adverse change clause or cross default clauses, where say a borrower would have availed moratorium or have entered into arrangements with creditors. Those kind of clauses, or more so the breach of financial covenants given the present situation, or the security cover deterioration clause. These will be more material to rely upon, and that would lead to either negotiating by way of restructuring or rescheduling of the debt, or eventually calling it an event of default if either of the things will not work, right? So I think I agree with what Rahul and Ravi mentioned, that although they are being regulated by SEBI, and although there is some level of oversight of SEBI, right, in terms of fund managers protecting the interest of the LPs in the fund. So in that sense, taking that argument forward, I believe fund managers will have to exercise caution and use their best judgment while granting deferment of interest or principal, or rescheduling or restructuring of debt, instead of calling it an event of default on a case-to-case basis. That's I think that's the most prominent thing which fund managers should keep in mind. I think, see, although SEBI has taken into account representations made by mutual funds over last 15 days in terms of with respect to their investments in debt securities or PTCs, where the ultimate NBFCs or banks are giving moratorium, and which is having an impact on the PTC payouts. So SEBI has yesterday itself come out with relaxation in the valuation norms, where it has relaxed the norms for valuation agencies and not to take into account dip in valuation as a default in debt securities held by mutual funds. Particularly where situation arises due to COVID pandemic lockdown, or in light of moratorium permitted by RBI. but similar relaxation has not yet been specifically granted or extended to AIFs, or in particular the debt funds, right? So in such cases, I think the fund manager should ideally be cautious enough, and in taking such decisions on a case basis where they are deferring interest or principal payment, they should ideally record all the IC or LPAC meeting minutes. They should record the basis of the reasons for not exercising EODs or accelerated payout rights, or the reason for waiving or delaying interest or coupon payouts. Having said that, when we come to event of defaults due to payment defaults, I think the fund managers particularly will have to take timely recourse to enforcement of securities, and the consequent action pursuant to that enforcement would be to freeze or lock the assets of and properties of the portfolio companies, security providers, and the promoters where they have provided their assets as securities, or particularly promoters where they have given personal guarantees. So eventually, see what would happen. A borrower may, or a security provider may, try to take shelter under the doctrine of frustration. But I think one can take comfort from the fact that under law and as per the jurisprudence laid down by courts, it has been held that repayment obligation of a borrower or a security provider has been casted as an absolute obligation by courts in India, irrespective of impracticability or impossibility of performance of a contract. So in the longer run, I think that should not be a challenging for enforcement of security. But I think we will have to be mindful of the stance which the courts have taken in last 1 month during the COVID lockdown. So I think what has happened is, in my view, the courts have rather taken a compassionate and sympathetic approach towards the borrower. It's a pro-borrower approach, at least to maintain status quo during these trying times where uncertainty looms large and COVID-19 issue is far from over. So during the initial lockdown days, I think we all may have heard about cases or borrowers approaching the courts, particularly Bombay High Court and Delhi High Court. So I would just like to quote one or two judgments there, where the courts have considered favorably in the immediate period, in the lockdown period, and they have given pro-borrower judgments. Right. Just to take an example of the Bombay High Court judgment in the Future Group, where the court have attributed the fall in value of the security package to COVID-19 situation, and they have restrained the trustee from enforcing the security. Also, we have seen that the Delhi High Court, in one of the matters, which is Anand Raj Limited versus Yes Bank, they have restrained the lender from downgrading the asset quality to NPA from the SMA2 category, for the reason that RBI's intention was to maintain status quo with regard to asset classification for the period intervening between March 1st and May 31st. So they've asked the lender not to take any action in downgrading the asset classification. Also, I think it is worthwhile to note that Bombay High Court has, in one of the cases, granted relief to the borrower from being classified as an NPA for past defaults. It's not about default in the current situation, but the past defaults. And the cue was taken from RBI's intention, or RBI's COVID-19 relief package, that RBI's intention is to grant moratorium in such cases also. Further, there was one case which Delhi High Court has taken cognizance of, where the borrower was not able to collect fees. It was an educational institution. It was not able to collect fees from the schools because of the lockdown, and therefore they were not able to make payments to the banks for their past defaults. So Delhi High Court has taken cognizance of that aspect and granted relief to the borrower from being classified as NPA. Right. So these are something to worry about in the immediate future. But having said that, it may be noted that courts have not adjudicated upon the substantive rights of the parties, which we believe that they will indulge in eventually after the lockdown is over, or once the dust of uncertainty has settled down.
So I think, Idriji, the two key takeaways from that, I think one is primarily in respect of locking the value in the company. I think even if a fund or a trustee intends to move against the borrower, it should be in a timely manner to ensure that at least there is stay on the sale or any adverse dealing of the asset so that the value in the company is locked.
Right.
I think before initiating any such action, the company should have communications with the lender, and lender should actually insist on timely communication on the events that are happening and also the implications of those events on the company and the business of the company. So I think these two would be the key takeaways from that. I will actually move to the last question. I think we are going way beyond time now.
Yeah.
We will move to the last question. My last question would be to each of the panelists. I think all of them have are or have been fund managers. Would you want to see post COVID, would you want to see any practical processes put in place by the portfolios? Harsh, why don't you go first?
So I think one of the big learnings from COVID has been managing liquidity, and no, a lot of the companies we are seeing, not in our portfolio but in many other funds portfolios, didn't even think of taking a working capital line. So I think scrutiny of how you're managing your cash flows on a day-to-day basis would become very important going forward.
Right. Nupur, what do you have to say on that?
I agree with Harsh. I think, cash and liquidity is something that most companies have historically not focused on. And it is something that is good to have even in good times. I mean, the strongest companies
Right.
are the ones that have focused on cash management.
Right.
That will be a good lesson to get out of this situation.
True. Ravi?
So I think the answer is similar, but this
Right.
was borne about by the earlier two crises with respect to both IL&FS as well as demonetization, that you need to hold cash and have a strong eye on OPEX. One other lesson that has already been learned, so it's pretty much more of the same, is not to have runway growth. And demonetization put a rude awakening to a lot of the NBFCs at that realm. And I think whoever was restarting some of that in last year, I think I've been reminded of that lesson quite rudely again.
Right. Getting it. Rahul? I mean, you manage a whole bunch of portfolios, so.
Yeah. So I would say, the interesting thing is when times are good, people keep throwing more people at the problem to grow, right? And I think one of the things we realized was that even in our own way, many of our companies and across portfolios were not necessarily using technology to its greatest effect, right? And including, most SaaS companies catering to businesses would not focus on India.
Right.
I feel like, one of the things companies need to do is really imagine the world slightly differently, embrace work from home, embrace, more flexibility in the workspace, think about using tech more actively, take out a lot of the overhead and the fat.
Right.
And so I think that, this is a good time for them to just bring more discipline into the business, right? And I think that goes with managing cash better, but also goes with managing talent better.
Right. So I cut out the fat. I think that is a learning from this. Also, I mean, to a lot of people who are locked inside the houses, maybe they can work out inside and cut out the fat. So I think I'll just take the poll question now, and I will end the segment with that. The answer to this is, I think, perhaps pretty straightforward. I would still want to see someone voting for us to initiate enforcement action, make some money on that. Let's see if that works.
It's a good thing the host can't vote, right?
Yeah, I think it's pretty straightforward. I'll be sharing the results. Yes. Lawyers are going to make lesser money. It's all up to you, fund managers now. So I think I'd like to thank each one of you. It's been a really engaging session, and I hope it was fun and interactive for the audiences also. If there are any parting thoughts, maybe one of the panelists or each of the panelists could tell us something.
Nitish, I just wanted to say there was a few questions coming up, particularly those were addressed to me. I've answered those in mail, so I didn't think we'd have much time. But
I was being actually conservative with that. I think we've gone way past our time. I will take one question. There's a question specifically for Ravi. By what percentage you think NPA will augment evergreening anticipated?
I think that's like predicting when the crisis will end. But, I think it's going to be specific to every sector. So obviously secured sectors will do better. Unsecured may not as much. So one specific area that I just wanted to point out was probably a lot of the fintech lending that has come through over the last couple of years, which did tend to a lot of this floating population, migrant population, new to credit segment. Those kind of bullet loans will see a lot more severe increase in credit cost versus the secured segment. So it's as crisp as I can put it.
I think the other question is for Harsh. Harsh, as we may say, many IT firms are approaching towards work from home till 2025 and training employees to work from home. What do you think about commercial infra space?
Well, I'm not an expert in that, so I'm not the best suited. But frankly speaking, in my personally, if I speak, I think that is just being exaggerated a little bit currently, because at the end of the day, we should not forget that we are social animals. So all of us need to be at a place. So definitely, it will have some impact on commercial real estate, but not to the order of what is being talked about at this point of time.
I think, Nupur, there's a generic question and perhaps a question that goes back to what we discussed before the session started, is on the winding up of 6 debt funds. So what do you think will happen? Is it going to create panic? I think I just read before our session that Amphi did scramble to ensure that there's going to be no panic. But maybe we can have your thoughts as parting thoughts on that.
See, if you ask me personally, I think most people are beyond the stage of panic. We've already gone through various stages of that thanks to COVID, and it's been panic on many different fronts.
Right.
I think it is a reality that everybody's portfolios have taken a hit. And it is also a reality that people who are cash strapped would have no choice except to, say, redeem and pull out, regardless of where the valuations have come down to. I think, for somebody who's running a fund management business, if you think it is not going to be sustainable, if you think it's not going to be meeting the objectives that you wanted to meet, maybe it's not a bad idea to just shut down early and allow everybody the opportunity to, just redesign. You redesign your business, your customers redesign how they consume, so as to speak, where they invest, how they invest. I generally don't think that the market will panic. We've all panicked for far too long for too many things, and I think we're all in that mode. We're all sort of I think everybody's planning for the next steps.
Right.
What do we do in the next 3 months? What do we do in the next 6 months? We are over that stage of saying, what do we do now?
Now, we're all battle hardened now, I think. Let's put it that way. So, okay. Thank you so much, all the panelists. Thank you. It's indeed been a pleasure. And I think this is the end of the session.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Nitish.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.